Well, Darren Raddysh is having the year of his life for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but can the Bolts re-sign him before he hits unrestricted free agency this summer? More on today's Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Tampa Bay Lightning podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. As always, we want to begin with a shout out to our everydayers. Those of you who tune into every single show, every single day, we love you and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan, and my co-host, Greg Stephen, like so many of us the past few weeks, down with a little bit of an illness. He's day-to-day. Hope to have him back soon. But Greg, if you're listening, feel better, buddy. We hope to have you back. Big day for Tampa Bay Lightning fans. A big game at Club BMI tonight. The Colorado Avalanche taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Game of the year, maybe, for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Definitely the game of the night in the NHL. A lot of fun coming out of that one. We're going to have one big key for a Tampa Bay Lightning victory over Colorado coming up a little bit later in the show. And one thing that I want to see from Jon Cooper heading into tonight's matchup. A lot coming up later on the show. Before we get to that, though, let's start with one of the best stories of the year for the Tampa Bay Lightning, maybe one of the best in the entire NHL, and that's been the rise of Darren Raddysh. Going from a depth defenseman, healthy scratch, kind of an offensive specialist, to somebody that is just having the absolute year of his life. Darren Raddysh, 7th in the NHL among defensemen this year in scoring. More impressive when you remember that he was healthy scratched for a handful of games at the beginning of this year. So if you go points per game for defensemen this year, he's fifth among some really good defensemen across the NHL. As we mentioned yesterday on the show, he's tied with Cale Makar, who we'll see later tonight, and Matthew Schaefer in defenseman goals with 12. That's already his career high. The first time he's hit double-digit goals. He's 3 points away from hitting his career high in points, and he's doing it almost at a point per game pace with so many games left in the season. And convenient for Darren Raddysh, all of this is going on in the year before he's scheduled to become an unrestricted free agent. Always funny how that works out, right? Darren Raddysh on a very friendly team, or a very team-friendly deal right now, 2 years, $975,000 cap hit. That's pretty good considering the value the Lightning are getting out of him this year. So one way or the other, however way you slice it, however way you want to look at the Darren Raddysh situation and sort of judge the season that he's having, he's due a raise, a well-earned and well-deserved raise for Darren Raddysh. The question for the Tampa Bay Lightning is exactly how much of a raise does Darren Raddysh get? And for how long? How long is that contract? That's going to be the $1 million question as JBB determines Raddysh's future in Tampa Bay. Cap space isn't the problem here. Let's put that out right now. Like, Tampa, I think, has cap space to go out and make a big move. $15 million just north of that next year, and pretty much everybody else is re-signed except for Oliver Bjorkstrand. That's another guy I think JBB's got to make a decision. And then you have $41 million to play with the year after that, which is the Nikita Kucherov contract year. So you do want to keep a significant chunk of change open for Kuch's new deal. But regardless, JBB's got some flexibility over these next couple years to go out and lock up a player like Darren Raddysh. Now, I know what a lot of people are saying about the situation right now is that if you're the Lightning, you don't want to overpay for one good year. You don't want to be like the David Clarkson deal or the Victor Stalberg deal, or, players who, go on a heater towards the end of their contract year and cash in with a big, multi-year, multi-million-dollar deal most of the time with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You want to be a little bit smart. But the thing is with Darren Raddysh is even when you take out this year, his career year, he still had a lot of value for the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially on the offensive side of the ice. Listen to this. The last 2 years, since the start of the 2024 NHL season, Darren Raddysh, among all defensemen in the NHL, 29th in scoring. Now, that doesn't seem super impressive, but listen to the names that he's above of. Chris Letang, our buddy Mikhail Sergachev, Brock Faber, Matthias Ekholm, Seth Jones, and Brady Shea, who signed a 7-year, $7 million deal just a couple of years ago, $7 million AAV. So you kind of see where I'm getting at is that Darren Raddysh is a huge pop of scoring, regardless of his use anywhere else on the ice. And there's teams willing to pay a premium for that. Now, as it relates to the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think you can spend a little bit on Darren Raddysh. It becomes a situation of how much do you want to bet on him moving forward? And it's kind of a bet where if you kind of keep him in the same situation, is he going to have another year like this, especially if you find a way to keep him with JJ Moser, who the Lightning also just re-signed, and those two have some amazing chemistry, and I think they bring out each other's best strengths. It's even if you take all that out and you bet on maybe he doesn't get to this level again, look at Darren Raddysh's floor, and that's the past couple of years in limited ice time. He still put in, a high of 37 points and had a little bit fewer, like 33 points the year before. So it's not like it's not like he's having a 60-point career season or bust. He is giving you a good source of depth scoring, and that's sort of the floor for Darren Raddysh. That alone, I think, is worth the Tampa Bay Lightning and JBB taking a little bit of a shot on him. Maybe somewhere in the $6 million range, maybe for 3 years, maybe 4 years. I think that's a low risk, high reward deal for the Tampa Bay Lightning because you have the cap space. You can go out and turn to Darren Raddysh and say, okay, keep doing what you're doing. If you're right, there's another big contract in store for you. If you're wrong and you're still on your floor, you're still getting $6 million a year, which is really good for a depth defenseman. He's playing like a number one defenseman right now. I think that's a really good deal. And if I'm the Lightning, I try to find a way to make that happen. Who knows? If you're Darren Raddysh, you might like playing in Tampa and the situation is right. You may go down a little bit. You may be in the $5 million range. That would be huge for the Lightning. Here's the caveat with that. Have you seen this NHL's free agent class that's coming up this summer? It's not great. And there is a real possibility that Darren Raddysh is going to be the number one target if he hits free agency in terms of defensemen. He's not better than Artemi Panarin. But for defensemen, he might be the top target. And as history has shown us, teams are willing to hilariously overpay for top targets on the free agent market, even if they're not necessarily deserved. We mentioned Brady Shea a few years ago. That's a guy that's always been sort of a middle six defenseman, like second pair, is only occasionally ever come out and been a consistent first pair guy. Wound up getting $7 million a year from the Nashville Predators. That was the same class as the Steven Stamkos class. You look at the deal that Gavrikov got last year, or even like somebody like Dmitry Orlov last year in the deal that he got. Teams are willing to pay a fortune. And you look at a guy like Darren Raddysh, who is on pace for possibly 70 points this year, and you start to wonder how many teams desperate for a really good, sort of quarterback style defenseman, somebody who moves the puck, somebody who sets up the offense. How much are teams willing to pay for a guy like that? And if you're Darren Raddysh and your agent already knows that. And I think that's the deal that he's pushing is, look, Darren Raddysh, you could probably get $8 million if you hit the open market this year. that becomes a little bit complicated because if you're Julien BriseBois in the Tampa Bay Lightning and you have a lot of cap control deals, are you willing to play that game where you're willing to overpay a little bit to lock up Darren Raddysh? It's a big risk, and I don't know, just based on his history, if that's one that JBB is willing to take. I think JBB would lock Raddysh up to more of a longer-term deal at a lesser cap hit. I think he'd be willing to do that, but I don't think he's going to get into the game where you pay Darren Raddysh 7 years for $7 million. I don't think that's BriseBois' game, and I don't think that's good for the Lightning moving forward. So it's going to be interesting to see the Raddysh situation, but I know that if I'm the Lightning, I'm having these conversations right now, and I'm trying to go to Darren Raddysh and say, look, you have a chance right now to play with guys like Nikita Kucherov, Jake Gensel, Brandon Hagel, Braden Point, up your stats and have a more really, really good years and possibly contend for the cup. This is a perfect situation for you. And you've been key for us this year. Let's find out a deal that works for both of us. I hope the Tampa Bay Lightning do just that in the next coming months, hopefully before the trade deadline, certainly before that open market comes in the summer. A lot to get to before then, including a major game for the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight. They are taking on the Colorado Avalanche, definitely the game of the night for the NHL. One big thing I want to see from Jon Cooper that I think may determine which way this game goes. That's more coming up on today's Locked On Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be honest, managing your finances can get very stressful very fast. Between the subscription you forget about, the bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down every hidden fee? That's where Rocket Money comes in. It's the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. You can finally see exactly where your money goes each month. You can set budgets, goals, get personalized insights, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. It even consolidates your checking, savings, and loans and investments into a single dashboard so you get a clear view of your entire financial picture. Take the guesswork out. Have Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Again, rocketmoney.com/lockedon to get started. Again, one more time, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to Locked On Lightning. Nick Morgan here. Greg Stephen is out sick. Hope to have him back soon because we're going to want to talk about this game coming up tonight in Tampa. Avs taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning, two of the best teams in the entire NHL, possibly a preview of the Stanley Cup final. If I'm a betting man, that's certainly my pick for this year's final. This is going to be a fun one. Certainly, I think maybe the game of the night for the NHL. If you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, potential to be one of the best games of the year. Obviously, I mean, anytime you play the Colorado Avalanche, especially this version of the Colorado Avalanche, and you're a Lightning fan, I think your mind turns to 2022, maybe getting a little bit of revenge, maybe proving that, the Lightning are still here. Because remember, the narrative after that Stanley Cup Finals was, Colorado is now the team on the up and up. They're the new dynasty. And this is sort of the last hurrah for this Tampa Bay Lightning core. I think every time this matchup happens, I think the Lightning have a lot of incentive to prove that they're still in it. They're still, very much cup contenders, and their window is still open. They've proven that this year. And I think this is a good chance to prove that again, because the Colorado Avalanche, undisputed, the best team in the NHL right now. They lost to Florida on Sunday, and that is extremely rare because that was only their third regulation loss of the season. Yeah, they've played 41 games. They're exactly at the halfway point, and they only have 3 regulation losses. If you remember at the beginning of this year, or not at the beginning, but maybe a couple of months ago, Greg made me a little bet. He wanted me to go over under on the Avalanche having 10 or fewer regulation losses. He was all in on the Avs finishing the season with fewer than 10 regulation losses. I scoffed at that a little bit. I said there's no way they keep this up, or no way they hit that low of a mark. I'm a little bit nervous about that bet now because Colorado looks like they might actually do that. Yeah, that's insane. And the big reason why is you look at this Avs team and there's not a lot of shortcomings. Like, they're good across the board. They're first in the NHL in scoring this year. They're first in goals against. Their goaltending has been superb. Both Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, the double Woods, top 4 in the NHL in save percentage. They're 1-2 in the NHL in goals against average. For everything is clicking on them right now. The number one, let's mention special teams. The number 1 penalty kill in the NHL right now. You're also getting some really good pops of scoring from other places. We mentioned Nathan MacKinnon. He leads the NHL in scoring right now. The Avalanche, beyond him, have 16 players with at least 10 points this season. That's pretty good for this stage of the season. I know it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but at the halfway point of the NHL season, to have virtually everyone on your team with at least 10 points, that is a little bit more rare and a little bit more impressive than it might seem. So kudos to the Colorado Avalanche for having that much depth. The only soft spot, really, that the Avalanche have going into this game is the power play. Somehow, with all those offensive weapons, with all the scoring, with all the superstars on that roster, 25th in the NHL, which is somehow worse than the Tampa Bay Lightning's. Now, if I'm the Lightning going into this game, I'm not exactly testing it. I'm not exactly saying let's rack up 6 penalty kills. So the Avalanche have to play with this weak power play. I'm not testing that theory, especially because the Lightning's penalty kill the past few games hasn't been great. But it is a little bit of a soft spot for the Colorado Avalanche. And I will mention that the other than the past few games, on the whole this year, the Lightning's penalty kill has been really good. Remember, a few weeks ago, they were number 1 in the NHL coming into this year. The big factor to me is going to be matchups. Matchups in this game are going to be incredibly crucial. And I think this is where Jon Cooper's coaching is going to come in hand a little bit. Obviously, Tampa playing at home, you're going to get the last change. Obviously, there's firepower up and down both lineups. There's firepower in the depth for both teams. So I think this is going to come down to coaching and what players Jon Cooper puts out against what Avs players and when. If I'm Jon Cooper, I look at that Anthony Cirelli line that you have right there. It's Anthony Cirelli, Brandon Hagel, Jake Gensel. We talk about Anthony Cirelli being just so good defensively. I almost wonder if you get that matchup against the Nathan MacKinnon line and you trust that defense to go out there and shut MacKinnon down and slow MacKinnon down. I think that's a big thing, but you don't want to get caught. The best way to say this is I think matchups are key. What players do you have that match up well against the other Avalanche lines? Like, do you trust your fourth line to go head to head against their fourth line? Or are you going to use the opportunity to maybe put, Nikita Kucherov out there against maybe their depth guys, possibly knowing that you may have to rely on your second and third lines to go out there again and go head to head with Nathan MacKinnon. I think that's going to be key. And if you're Jon Cooper, I think you're very careful about who you put on the ice and when. Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody on both teams are good enough to match up against anybody else. Yeah, like even the depth guys, you look at the quality of guys on both of these teams. And yeah, if you're Colorado, you probably do trust Ross Colton, miss that guy to go out there and get some good minutes against Tampa Bay's first line. And if you're, Jon Cooper, you probably trust somebody like, Charles Edward Dastow on that bottom pair, to go out there and possibly try to go slow down the top line for Colorado. That, I think, is going to be the X factor in this game, is how those matchups line up. Who do you trust to slow down Colorado's big guns, and in what situations? I think it's going to be a little bit by committee, and I think Colorado is probably thinking the same way. I don't think they're going to put the same guys head-to-head against Tampa, and Tampa with that last change, Jon Cooper with that last change, has an opportunity to maybe find some cracks and exploit certain players with certain line combinations for the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's going to be interesting to see, because this has the opportunity to be a really fun game tonight. I'm looking forward to it. There's one more big key to the game and a player to watch from both teams that I want to talk about. We'll get to that coming up in just 1 second. Welcome back to Locked on Lightning. Nick Morgan here. Greg Stephen is out sick today, so we're flying solo. Keys to the game for tonight's Tampa Bay Lightning game against the Colorado Avalanche, the first place in the NHL Colorado Avalanche. And that is just to make this a playoff game. Yeah, bring back those vibes from 2022 when these two teams played in the Stanley Cup final. Maybe not the results, but bring back the vibes. Look, this is, I think, going to be the game of the night in the NHL, and I think this is, up to this point, one of the biggest games the Lightning have had at home all year. And I want to see the crowd into it. And if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, I want you to feed off that crowd. I want you to go out there and make some big plays early and then let that energy take over. Feed off the energy of the crowd. Don't be afraid to play with a little bit of emotion. This is a big game with, I think, some bragging rights at stake a little bit, even though it's, at the end of the day, a regular season game between two teams not in the same conference. But I do think when you look at the optics and you have a team like Colorado, who's the best team in the NHL coming in, you do have the option to kind of make a statement a little bit. And there are players, not players, but pundits around the NHL that do question the quality of this Lightning team still. Even though they're in first place right now, even though they have a lot of guys clicking in the right direction, there's still some doubt about this Tampa Bay Lightning team. There still seem to be mentioned behind, the Florida Panthers once they get healthy. They still seem to be mentioned behind, the Carolina Hurricanes. A lot of people are picking the Canes to come out of the East this year. If you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think this is a good chance to go out and cement your status as a cup contender. And a win over a really good Colorado team who doesn't lose a lot is just the way to do just that. So I want to see the Lightning play with a little bit of emotion tonight, experience the full, I guess, aura of the game. Don't take it over the line, but don't be afraid to play with a little bit of a playoff atmosphere vibe tonight. Let's get to a couple players to watch for tonight's game. For Colorado, obviously, you have your pick of a lot of people, but one guy that I want to mention to watch out for tonight is Brock Nelson. 34 years old, finally making his first Olympic team, and he deserves it, every bit of it. He's been a godsend on that second line for Colorado. Just a really good pickup at the end of last year, and he is really, I think, really cemented his spot as a really good addition for the Avs. He, adds a big source of stability between Arturi Lehkonen and Val Nichushkin on that second line. And he's really contributing from the depth scoring standpoint as well. He's coming into this game with a 5-game point streak, 11 points in his last 7 games. A big reason why the Colorado Avalanche beat the Lightning a few years ago was because that second line was just as good as the first line. You talk about the year Nazem Kadri had that year, the year Val Nichushkin had that year. And it was just impossible for, Tampa to really slow down all of them at once. And with Brock Nelson there between those two guys, it certainly looks like Colorado is trending that way again. So that's somebody I would definitely watch out for tonight. If you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, a player to step up, a player I'm watching tonight, it's JJ Moser, fresh off his contract extension. Look, there's a lot of offensive firepower in this game for both teams, which means a guy like JJ Moser is going to have to really be on his P's and Q's in the defensive zone. And look, right now, as it stands with everybody else out, JJ Moser is kind of the defensive captain of that blue line. You know, he's the anchor. He's the guy that goes out there, blocks the shots, make those defensive plays. Ryan McDonough too, but JJ Moser is the one getting the most of the ice time right now. He's emerged into a really good defensive complementary first pair defenseman. I mentioned yesterday when we talked about his contract extension, there's a little bit of, to go on the Colorado side, Devin Tays and the compliment that Tays has been to Cale Makar. You talk about like Jacob Slavin from a few years ago, just guys that are really, really good, heady, number one defensive defensemen that go out there and let a rover in, for this year, it's been Darren Raddysh, but a rover like Victor Hedman go out there and let him do his thing a little bit more. Very defensively responsible. And I think JJ Moser has turned into that guy. And I think he's going to have a chance to really stay at home and, sort of lead the defense against a really tough Colorado offense. So that's who I'm looking forward to tonight. Let's get to the over-under. I hate this segment, but I'm doing it just to appease Greg because we're never right. Over-under tonight, according to our friends at FanDuel, 6.5 goals. I'm leaning the over on this. And look, this could go either way. You could tell me this is going to be a 2-1 defensive matchup where the goaltenders stand on their head. You can tell me this is going to be back and forth, kind of a shootout, wind up being 5-3, 6-4, 6-5, something like that. And I would believe you either way. Just based on gut with the energy of the crowd, I'm leaning this towards more on the shootout side. I think it might be a 5-3 final score by the time the game's done tonight. Really good game either way. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm going to be in the edge of my seat. It's going to be a fun night for fans of both teams, I'm sure. On tomorrow's Locked on Lightning, we'll have a full recap from this game. Get into the big moments and much, much more. In the meantime, be sure to hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening in on your favorite podcasting platform. Really helps us out with our numbers, and it helps you guys know when we have fresh content out for you. Also, be sure to follow us on social media, Locked on Lightning on Instagram, TikTok, pretty much anywhere you scroll. We would love to chat with you throughout the week. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked on Lightning. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back with new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.